Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Aviation Sustainability Africa podcast. This is a podcast that explores the implication of socioeconomic sustainability and climate change for the global aviation industry, with particular focus on the African continent. It features interviews with experts from airlines, airports, civil aviation authorities, think tanks, tourism bodies, and other organizations with emphasis on ESG. The podcast will also help us gain insight into the latest trends and developments, the challenges and possible solutions, technological innovations, and changing mindset towards sustainability in the aviation industry. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Sean Mendes, who needs no introduction. He's a consultant and he's very vast in startup airlines, airport consulting for airports and airlines. And of course, he's very Africa focused when it comes to aviation. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you very much, Tony. Good to be here.
Fantastic. So it's exactly 1 week since Air Peace Airlines, the Nigerian carrier, made an entry into the London route. Started with Lagos, Gatwick, and of course, just a few days ago, the Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, also approved Abuja Gatwick. Tell me, since the last 1 month, how do you think Air Peace has fared?
Well, they're still flying. So, that's the first hurdle that's done. A lot of airlines announce routes, even start a route, and then 2 flights later. Well, Air Peace. I mean, if you look at that track record, I think their Tel Aviv flight lasted 3 flights. I think their India flights lasted 3 weeks. So, their track record in long-haul operations has not been very good. So this one seems to be doing a lot better. But let's be fair on this. If you look in terms of what the numbers are, it takes a lot more effort for a Nigerian airline to screw up operations to London than it does to be successful. The market is very much there for the taking, and you just need to meet a very low bar of being able to fly those flights largely on time, and you will wind up getting passengers by default, if nothing else.
So great. So let's look at the implications of the cost of entry. What do you think about the partnership with North Atlantic Airlines with the ACMI?
I think that's an interesting one, and I think it's something which will play out over the next few weeks, I think. My understanding on this is when Air Peace had permission and slots to operate 5 times a week to London Gatwick. Their initial plan was to operate all 5 with their own Boeing 777s, and then they have come out now with an agreement with North Atlantic, where North is going to operate their 787-9s. I think it's 3 or 4 times a week is North operating, and the remaining times is Air Peace's own aircraft. This, when it was announced by both North and Air Peace, was announced as being only valid till the end of May. And this makes sense because, North, as a primarily transatlantic carrier, their peak season for markets across the Atlantic from the UK and Europe into the US is summer, which, the peak season is in June. That's the only time of year that they realistically can make money on their own network. So I highly doubt that Norse would have been willing to offer them the same attractive terms. And let's be fair, from what I know of the deal, it's not very attractive terms either that they're getting, even for April and May. But, the terms to operate between Lagos and London on a wet lease just a few times a week would not have been that attractive for extending this. So I don't actually expect to see that this agreement will continue beyond June. I think, we've already seen that Air Peace on their own flights have upgraded the aircraft from the 777-200 to the larger 777-300. And I think we might see that happening over the summer period, more flights by their own aircraft rather than, by the smaller 787. Simply because in the peak season in June, July, Norse needs their aircraft back, and Air Peace needs more seats than the Norse aircraft can provide anyway.
So basically, it was alleged that, Air Peace released a statement that is going to be, getting more seats allowances, and they've got more aircrafts coming up, sometime in December to give way for the demand. So is this working as a result of the North contract not being renewed, and they can now put up their capacity with their own aircrafts? Or what do you think?
I think, we're going to have to see what Airpeace is going to do with regards to Hajj in particular. Traditionally, Airpeace has deployed their own 777s on Hajj. They already have a very strong route operating between, their only successful long haul route so far has been operating Lagos, Kano, Jeddah. And I think that's operating 5 times a week pretty well with the 777 so far. So, they've done well on that one route at least. So the question is how they're going to juggle, running. They've got two 777s currently flying, one 777-200, one 777-300. As Hajj season pulls into full swing, how are they going to deploy this? They're going to have to make choices as to whether they're going to prioritize the larger capacity on London, or they're going to prioritize that larger capacity into Jeddah, and balance the utility of these aircraft while maintaining a reliable schedule. There's it's going to be tricky for them. It's not impossible. The potential is there. They've shown they can make Jeddah a success. They've shown so far that they're not screwing up London. So if they do things right, they can really benefit. In terms of the new aircraft, well, they're not going to be new. I mean, these are going to be second-hand aircraft that have been parked for a while. There's no shortage of 777s in the market. But I think, if Airpeace has learned something from their previous adventure obtaining 777s back in 2017, 18, 19, I think when they got the first aircraft they got, is that these aircraft that have been parked for a while, or these aircraft that have been retired by other carriers, are not always in a very good state and able to, enter service reliably on day one. There's a lot of maintenance work that's going to need to go into these, and expecting that, oh, here's a plane and put a new paint scheme on it and it's going to fly great tomorrow. That's not going to happen. It's going to be a process for them. So, I hope. Look, they've been running close to 10 years now. There's no reason to assume that they haven't learned their lessons. But yeah, their track record hasn't been the most impressive over the years in terms of long haul operations in particular.
Great. So let's talk competition. I mean, there are other carriers on that route, BA and Virgin Atlantic. And now there was, of course, some fair war, which, of course, ultimately the passengers were the greatest beneficiaries, as long as it lasts. How do you think this will pan out going forward?
That's a tricky question. The reality is, I think this whole talk about fair wars has been very much overblown. I think you've seen a perfect storm of multiple things happening at the same time. You've seen Airpeaces enter into the market. You've seen a low season, and you've seen a naira whose value has been volatile in recent weeks, up and down and up and down. We know that the Lagos to London market, for example, is about 500,000 passengers a year, and the total Nigeria to the UK market is close to 750,000 passengers a year. So these are 2023 figures. Now, the actual market for non-stop flights is constrained. It is constrained by the bilateral air service agreement between Nigeria and the UK, which basically grants 21 weekly flights to each side. So 21 flights that a UK carrier can fly and 21 flights that a Nigerian carrier can fly. The reality is, even if every single seat between Lagos and London was filled on the UK side by someone flying between Lagos and London, so nobody has a connection flight to Manchester, to New York, to Tokyo, to anywhere else, there would still not be enough non-stop seats in that market to meet the demand. So that market is artificially constrained significantly. Therefore, when anyone comes into that market, whether it is Airpeace, whether it is United Nigeria, whether it is Dana, whether it's anyone from the Nigerian side who comes in to utilize those 21 Nigerian frequencies, immediately the passengers who are not able to get seats on British Airways and are currently having to fly via Turkish or Qatar or KLM or whoever, immediately those passengers will move their business away from, these indirect carriers back towards direct flights. And 80% of passengers will choose a direct flight given the option. As a result, you see that these people have to now offer a new unique selling proposition. In the past, they got the business by default effectively because people were unable to fly nonstop. Now they're going to have to compete. So as a result, they are dropping their fares to have to compete on price. People are not going to choose to fly London, Istanbul, Lagos, unless it's cheaper than flying London, Lagos nonstop. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Other than other than a very small subset of people who may have work in Istanbul or who prefer Turkish Airlines for whatever reason, that their business is going to fall out. So that is where you've seen an immediate lowering of fares. That's not necessarily a price war. That is simply market dynamics. When additional capacity comes into the nonstop market, it's supply and demand. Additional supply means lower prices for the demand. But on the flip side, you've also seen the fact that the naira has changed its value. And when you're looking in terms of a naira that people were valuing at 1,800, even 1,900 in some cases just a few weeks ago, and then dropping down to 1,200, you're talking a 30, 40%, what $1 was worth. You can say a $1,000 ticket was 1.9 million naira, but now that same $1,000 ticket is worth 1.2 million naira. So that is not a price war. That is just the reality of the currency that you're looking and pricing it in. So I think it's a combination of all of it. I think there's the competitive response. I was tracking British Airways and Virgin Atlantic, which are the most direct competitors over there, and their pricing in peak season primarily, because peak season is where the real battle is going to be fought. And their peak season pricing has not really changed. Their peak season pricing, when adjusted for foreign exchange, has pretty much been the same. I mean, you're talking in the nearly 2 million naira round trip for economy class on both BA and Virgin in June, July, August. It was that before Airpeace entered the market, and it continues to be the lowest fares available after they enter the market is in the range of about $1,200. The business class fares have not budged at all on Virgin and BA, and that is the reality. Virgin and BA are selling a bulk of their business class tickets to Nigeria to corporate customers. So whatever their retail rates may be, the corporate customer has this negotiated rate anyway, whether it's $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 or whatever discount, those guys are going to pay it anyway. And those guys are not going to fly on Airpeace as is. They have, these are British companies or global companies who have corporate deals to fly everywhere in the world. And Airpeace's route network, covers Lagos, Abuja, Harcourt, and a few places in West Africa, while, BA is London, New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, and Australia. So obviously a corporate is far more likely to be traveling with BA and Virgin than they are with Airpeace. So I think definitely there has been a shift in market dynamics, as a result of having additional nonstop capacity. But I don't think that is necessarily a fare war. I think it is just, it is the indirect carriers primarily who have no choice but to drop their fares in order to offer a competitive offering to Airpeace during the off-peak season in general. And to just go a bit more into this, I think where Airpeace has made a big error in their entry strategy was when they came in with their sub 1 million naira fares. Initially, the first week or two of sales, they came in with that pricing at all times. So they were actually offering this pricing in peak season as well. Where in peak season, we're talking less than half of what anybody else was offering. So Airpeace was stuck in a position where I think they may have sold too many seats at that price in peak season. It's all well and good to say we want to cater to Nigerians and things like that, but you're not a charity. Well, who knows? Alan Onyema keeps saying that he's not running this as a business. He's running it for the good of Nigerians. That makes you a charity, not a business, unfortunately. And that, unfortunately, also is something that, if it is the truth and he continues to sell, below costs, he's the one who's doing the price dumping. But we'll leave that for now. The reality is you cannot sell tickets at $600 round trip all year round and expect to make money. The market between West Africa and the UK in particular is you can sum it up as 7 months of losses and 5 months of profits, and you have to make enough in those 5 months of profits to cover the losses in the other 7 months. So, you've got to make your money in the peak season. That doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be charging, 3 and 4 million naira for economy, but it also means you can't be charging, 800,000 and expect to make money when, 70% of your plane is sold. So I think this has been a big reason why they've had to upgrade that aircraft from the 777-200 to the 300, because quite simply, directionally, people coming just after schools close and so forth, those flights were full. And then the ability to make money on the last few seats, because that's where airlines really make their money, on the last few seats that are sold, was lost because they simply didn't have enough capacity. So the 777-300 coming in may change that. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see the dynamics. But to this point, I have not seen what so much of the media calls a fair war. I think a lot of that is just a lot of people who don't follow the market closely, jumping to conclusions based on anecdotes and based on not understanding what they're looking at when they look at a website.
Great. But Alan was on TV and was talking about some carriers operating below costs and that was really unfair. And he mentioned that their governments are supporting them, according to him. I don't know what the details are, but if they are operating below costs, then what does that portend for Airpeace?
I think Alan needs to look in the mirror, because if he wants to see a company that's been operating below cost for the last 10 years, he needs to look at his own airline. His own airline is not profitable. By his own admission, it is not profitable, yet it continues to run for 10 years, which means he's operating below cost. So yeah, determining what an airline's costs are is a very complex thing. At the end of the day, if an airline is profitable as a whole, you can't really say they're operating under cost on a specific route, because the value of a single route, as you say, maybe, they're operating under cost to Lagos. What is the cost to Lagos? Certainly you have direct operating costs, and if an airline is operating below their GOCs, certainly it's not worth their while to do it either. There's when you lose money on every passenger, you're becoming Rwanda. But if you are covering your operating costs and then you're allocating your overheads in different ways, it's a lot of a different story. Someone like British Airways, for example, as I mentioned, they have corporate contracts. The corporate contracts require them, they get these big corporate contracts to fly to different parts of the world because they fly to different parts of the world. So the fact that they are offering, yes, we can also fly you to Lagos, they may lose that a few $1,000s on the Lagos flight, but they're gaining multiple $1 million by winning this corporate contract from JP Morgan or Exxon or whichever of these major international MNCs that that have these corporate contracts with British Airways. So it's very hard for someone to sit in isolation in Nigeria and say that another airline is flying below cost on this, especially when he should know, and he does know, I'm sure, what that it's not uncommon for airlines to operate below cost at some times, as long as you're covering your direct operating costs. Airlines are a capital intensive industry, and the way you allocate your costs and the way you recover your costs has to be looked at as a system-wide thing, and not just necessarily on single line items like, the Lagos route makes money, or this price at this time of year is too low. So I think that's nonsense. I've also seen him make other comments like, they're selling tickets below $100. I saw that, and there was a big WhatsApp forward going around. Someone had a snapshot that British Airways was selling a ticket for $100. Yeah, that was $100 as the base fare, plus $300 in fuel surcharge, plus airport taxes, came to $1,240 round trip, which was a lot higher than anyone has, than anyone has been accusing. No one offering a $1,200 round trip from Abuja to London can ever be accused of price dumping, I assure you. So while $100 may be a base fare, you look at the fact there's a $300 surcharge on it. Now you're paying $400 one way, and that's no longer cheap. So, again, it's all about context. And Alan has been very economical with the truth when he talks about a lot of things. And this is not anything new. I mean, he's spun things to his perspective many times over the years. And, consequently, for all the respect I have for what he does as an airline, I don't necessarily believe a word he says when he opens his mouth.
Great. So let's talk about support. I mean, Alan has also come out to say that Gatwick is not giving them all that support. Of course, he has also come out. Some people are trying to sabotage him. Had all that rhetorics. Now, let's talk about support. From whom? What support do you think that the Nigerian government can give Airpeace to make sure that it competes favorably on that Lagos-London route?
I don't think the Nigerian government needs to support Airpeace in particular. I think the Nigerian government, and any government in Africa particularly, needs to create an enabling environment for their airlines to thrive. That means, infrastructure. You see that in Nigeria, you wind up having to do a lot of things above cost, like acquire fuel or things as such, simply because there is no reliable fuel supply. The refineries have not existed consistently, so there's imported fuel and things. So create the enabling environment to have fuel supply, to have access to foreign exchange at stable rates, not necessarily force people to go to the black market and because they can't get forex availability through banks. Create, decent airports in the right places with the right infrastructure. Closing Lagos airport runways for 6 months and 8 months at a time for renovation. How much does that cost airlines in taxi time alone? Having to, taxi 20 minutes just to get to your arrival and departure runways. These are the kind of things that with proper planning, and this is where the government actually can control things rather than coming up with market distorting policies that favor one carrier or disfavor others. And we've unfortunately, I had a lot of hopes for the minister. I think he spoke, especially after the last minister who was by the end of his term was openly favoring some policies at the expense of others. This minister came in initially, and other than his sales pitch for Airbus, he had done a pretty good job, in the first few months of his term. But I think in the last couple of weeks, especially his statements with regards to Dana Air and his, you can be a hands-on minister, but you must not put your hands into it. He's not hands-on, he's hands inside. And I think that has been where I've lost a bit of confidence in his ability to deliver the reforms that he's actually promising because, it's his sense to be developing the big man syndrome that a lot of politicians tend to be once they come into ministerial office.
Great. So do you think that with the approval by Festus Keyamo on the Abuja, an additional route for Abuja, London for Air Peace is as a way of trying to balance out the BASA with with the UK? Do you think is there any balancing in that area? Because he also made a point that British Airways flies I think 21 times in a week and Virgin Atlantic flies I think did he say 9 times? I'm not sure of the figures now. So was that maybe to also balance the BASA agreement, or what do you think the direction of the minister is around that BASA agreement, which is also always skewed to Nigeria because we don't have carriers to compete favorably with other nations?
Yeah, the BASA allows 21 frequencies for each side, of which the UK side is using all 21, 14 by British Airways, 7 times to Lagos, 7 times to Abuja, and 7 by Virgin Atlantic to Lagos. So that's how the 21 are distributed on the UK side. And on the Nigerian side, 5 are currently being used by Air Peace and 16 are available. I believe Air Peace, United Nigeria, and one other have been designated to use these bilaterals. So I think it's positive. If Air Peace wants to operate from Abuja to London, they certainly should. But there's a big caution in this. As I was saying, the market from Lagos to London is 500,000 passengers a year. The market from Abuja to London is 145,000 passengers a year. So that's 1/3 the size of Lagos. Certainly, the competition's a lot less than it is in Lagos. The average fares, the yields, are also slightly, not hugely, but slightly better in Abuja. And the premium traffic, the business class and first class traffic in Abuja is a lot better than it is in Lagos as a percentage of the total travelers. But 140,000 passengers a year is not quite as large as 500,000. Abuja is going to be a market. Lagos, as I said, is a market that's fallen into the lap. The demand is there. The market is constrained from new entrants on the nonstop. And, it takes more effort to lose in Lagos than it'll take to win. Abuja is a different story. Abuja is going to be competitive. British Airways is already entrenched in that market, and British Airways has a full network beyond London. So if you're going to New York, you will fly British Airways, Abuja, London, New York. If you're flying to Tokyo, you'll fly Abuja, London, Tokyo. If you're flying to Paris, Abuja, London, Paris. Air Peace is just going to be able to offer Abuja to London, and with a decent connection network, they can offer Maiduguri, Gombe, Asaba, all the other places behind Abuja, where Abuja makes a logical connecting hub to London. But those, again, Abuja, New York is 50,000 passengers. Asaba to London is 150, and there's a difference in terms of the size of British Airways hub markets and Air Peace's hub markets, especially their hub markets in Abuja, because their network is primarily focused on Lagos. So I think there'll be a lot more challenges. Flying a 777 is going to be a loss maker for them if they try that. They don't have something that can do that route between the size of a 777 and down to an Embraer 195. effectively, those are the two aircraft types they have which could potentially do that route. And Embraer 195 E2 is well, it would be a very interesting option. They're using it on Lagos Johannesburg, which is the same distance more or less as Abuja London. So it's not like it can't do it, but it would be a very interesting passenger experience to see if they did try to do that. And I'd be curious. It may be worth a while, but I think Abuja to London is not going to be as easy an entry into that market. And again, and take nothing away, entering the London market is not easy regardless how you do it. And I think that PR in terms of how they've marketed this route has been masterful. For 2 weeks at the end of March and beginning of April, it was like every second person I knew was forwarding me a WhatsApp of somebody eating Nigerian food on a plane, and Alan walking through Lagos airport with a bunch of beautiful women behind him. So they did a masterful job at that, but PR will only go so far. It gets people to notice you. At the end of the day, there needs to be substance behind it, and Lagos has enough ingredients to make that substance. I have my doubts if Abuja is also going to be able to deliver the same.
Great. So let's talk about, everybody else has got an opinion about Airpeace except Airpeace themselves when it comes to strategies, when it comes to code share, partnership, and all that. It has often mentioned that, okay, Airpeace needs to have some loyalty program, have some code share, have to have a strategy beyond, London, going to, just like you mentioned, on BA, Abuja to New York, and etc. And now Airpeace has come adding to his strategy to say, okay, you know what, we can pick you from Asaba to London, we can pick you from Maiduguri to London. How do you think this will pan out for Airpeace? Is it something is it a strategy in the right direction? And what do you think, coming to code shares and partnership and loyalty programs, how can that help assist, Airpeace in being sustainable on that route?
Okay. First things first, let's be clear. To say that anything Airpeace does as part of a strategy is a bit of an exaggeration, because they've operated for 10 years and they've tried to do 100 different things, 99 of which have failed. So, a strategy is something where you've got a long-term vision of things, and Airpeace does not work with long-term. Airpeace is literally flavor of the day. Start it today, stop it tomorrow, and go on to the to the latest thing. So as far as that goes, I won't necessarily say it's strategy. I'd say it is just trying your hand at different things and seeing which one works, and hopefully not screwing it up too badly. I think Airpeace is significantly constrained, partly by the fact that the home market is Nigeria. Nigeria is a very difficult place to do business for a variety of reasons. The economic climate is volatile. So the potential is definitely there, but to capture that potential consistently, whether it's aviation or whether it's any other industry, it's not like aviation is the only industry that finds Nigeria difficult. The market is great, but the skills needed to constantly be successful in that market are hard to master. So I think that is a problem. I think one big issue which Airpeace has when dealing with doing international business is Alan Onyema's current legal situation. While he's been very careful to distance his personal legal issues with that of Airpeace, and has been able to do that successfully enough that Airpeace now is not considered a pariah, which it shouldn't be by any means. The bottom line remains that Alan still has legal issues that need to be resolved. He maintains, of course, that he's innocent of it, and innocent until proven guilty, given the benefit of the doubt there. But the point is, these are still hanging over the head of his head, and potentially, therefore, over the head of Airpeace in terms of partnership and viability. You're going to struggle to be able to convince, say, a Delta Airlines that I want to partner with you and be a code share partner or whatever, when 6 months from now a news article may come out that, oh, by the way, the CEO of that airline we just partnered, and the primary owner or founder or whatever of that airline, he's just been convicted for money laundering. That's not a risk that Delta is going to be willing to take, and that a lot of other major carriers, international carriers for whom Nigeria is one of many markets they operate in. They're not going to risk their global reputation over a partnership with a Nigerian carrier where this uncertainty is there. So I think if Alan wants to become more of a global player, he's going to need to drop the bravado and figure out a way to resolve these pending legal issues, because I promise you, in many discussions I've had with many lessors, airlines, or whatever, and when we discuss Airpeace, they're always like, what's the status of his current thing? And until that is resolved, it's going to significantly limit the potential of what's happening. So Alan needs to, while he's been able to distance himself legally from Airpeace as an entity, it's not yet happened reputationally. And the more that he puts himself out there walking through airports every time there's an inaugural flight with people following him, the more his personal brand is associated with Airpeace's brand, and that is going to limit Airpeace's ability to legitimately become a global player as opposed to becoming a Nigerian player. And in the Nigerian market, it's viewed as a positive. I mean, Nigerians think that every Nigerian who's accused of a crime abroad is innocent and he's being victimized. And Airpeace has made, has survived for 10 years on their strategy. The only strategy they seem to have had is to figure out a way to be the victim of everything. I mean, whatever goes wrong. There's a typhoon. The typhoon has come because Airpeace's plane was flying in that vicinity, and they didn't like us, and so the gods of thunder, decided to crack down on us. So Airpeace does a great job of playing the victim, but playing the victim only goes so far and in so many few markets.
Great. So again, I wanted to emphasize that, I mean, there has been so much patriotism around Airpeace. Nigerians have, just like you said, every WhatsApp message received, they're serving jollof rice. Everybody say, fly Airpeace. Airpeace must survive. Airpeace must grow. Airpeace is doing good for us on this route. Fantastic. But Airpeace is not the only Nigerian carrier that's been on that route. Okay, there has been Medview, there have been Arik, of course, Virgin Nigeria, and then, of course, on those airlines too, there was jollof rice. Yeah, there was Bellevue, there was jollof rice, there was a Forero and pounded yam, all sorts of offering. Okay, so now, at what point will we go beyond this food and kind of service offering? What really is the meat in making sure that a route is sustainable beyond all this PR?
And let me be perfectly honest. For what people love to say, oh, I want my jollof rice, oh, I want, these pretty Nigerian girls talking to me and everything. If British Airways came in $10 cheaper tomorrow, they would jump to British Airways in a heartbeat. It's all about being able to deliver a price-sensitive business model. And as a Nigerian airline, that means you have to be reliable, because that is where Nigerian airlines have failed in the past. If you start delaying flights, if you start canceling flights, if you start delivering a product other than what people are expecting. And, this is where the danger of the wet lease with North Atlantic comes in. It's all well and good to say you're serving jollof rice and Nigerian hospitality, but more than half the flights are operating with an all-British crew. You don't have that Nigerian hospitality. You've got a British registered plane for a company registered in Norway, and a complete United Nations of pilots and cabin crew serving you. That's not quite Nigerian on more than half his flights. So again, if that is going to be the pitch, it'll work fine in the beginning. But as more and more people fly, and more, the first time that some passenger has an argument with some white stewardess about about anything, some cultural misunderstanding, and that video makes it to social media, they're going to have a hell of a time. You live by social media, you die by social media. The same influencers who are like, oh my God, this is so wonderful, will be like, oh my God, why are there white stewardesses and who don't speak local languages and who don't know cultural respect and everything. They didn't bow to the proper yoga in the proper way, and that'll be a problem to them. So it's not easy. They've done a great job so far, but that doesn't mean it's going to be sustainable in that respect. And at the end of the day, it is going to come down to money. I promise you. The Nigerians living in the UK, you see the influencers, you see the politicians, you see the big men. Those are a handful of the total amount of traffic. The bread and butter is going to be the middle-class Nigerian workers in the UK who's working at a manager at some company over there, and he's got 3 children. So 5 of them need to pay for tickets to come back. And if that is $50 more expensive, that's $250 more. And I promise you, they're not going to spend that $250. They're going to keep that money to use when they come on holiday. And they will buy an indirect ticket. They will buy a ticket through whatever, because they don't sense the value proposition is good enough. So no matter what you do in terms of that, your bread and butter market has got to be targeting the Nigerian diaspora. And he's done good. So again, I said, what they've done so far is great. It has to be sustainable. Targeting students, targeting things like that. These are the people who will come to you, because this is where the volume of the traffic comes from, even though it may not be, where the news comes from and where everything is. But this is the network. This is the people. 400 out of 500,000 passengers are going to be from that demographic. It's only the 100,000 above that who are flying business class, who are, making TikTok videos to load up of of the jollof rice they got on board in their business class seat.
So, do you think the business class strategy versus the economic class strategy, which will make it better for airpeace?
But see, this is it. They don't have a business class. On the 3 out of 5 days of the week when Norse is flying, there's no business class on that aircraft. It's all economy class. It's economy and premium economy. There's no business class half the time. Business class only operates on, I think, Thursdays and Friday nights or something like that. So, I mean, there is no business class strategy. That's what I'm saying. When we use the word strategy, that's being very generous to airpeace. They don't have a strategy. They're doing whatever today takes their fancy, and tomorrow will be something different, and the next day may be back to what we're doing today. Who knows? So they do not have a business class strategy. In fact, I've looked. They've been just, on the professional side of things, airpeace messes everything up. The thing they've done right here, and which I said I keep giving them right, is their PR has been masterful, but everything else behind it has lacked substance, and that needs to change because you can only ride that PR goodwill wave for so long. I promise you, when things start going wrong, and they will go wrong. Every airline, no matter how well organized you are, is going to have one day where everything goes to hell. There's snow on one side, there's floods on the other side, there's a power cut, something catches fire, an aircraft has a tech problem, you divert to Algeria. Something will happen. How you deal with that, how you're resilient to deal with that is going to determine how your future, views are going to get. Because I promise you, the first time that there is a huge disruption on an airpeace flight to London, you will have 20 times the views than you will of your jollof rice.
Fantastic. So now, away from the jollof rice, now let's talk about corporate governance. Do you think this could also be a way that airpeace can help sustain its business, or the lack of it is what's giving some issues?
Corporate governance and airpeace are two things that should never be mentioned in the same sentence. Airpeace is a family-run business. It is as simple as that. You can see it from day one. And Alan has made no bones of it. It is Alan, it is his wife, his children. Every aircraft is named after a family member. Every board member seems to be Alan and his, family members. His management team seems to be Alan and his handpicked, may not be family members, but definitely, close associates, close enough to him to be family members for all practical purposes. They've been indicted with him. So I think that kind of tells you how close you are. There are people who are accused to be involved in criminal schemes with him. So definitely, his is not a corporate governance. It is a family-run business. And there's nothing wrong with a family-run business. The thing is, again, it has its positives in that, certainly you've got control over all aspects of it, but it has its negatives in terms that you run the risk of surrounding yourself by yes men. And I know for a fact that, from everyone I know who's worked for airpeace, disagreeing with the conventional wisdom that comes from the top is a surefire way to find your way out the door. So, survival in airpeace is largely based upon agreeing with the boss more often than not, and that isn't necessarily the way that you're going to be able to evolve. He's got the same business model as he had 10 years ago, even though the market has changed significantly. He needs to probably constantly evolve, but he's not going to happen as long as the only people who get promoted are either have to be named on Nyema or have earned your loyalty by being very loyal to him rather than to the company.
So staying 10 years running an airline, which arguably is the shelf life for airlines in Nigeria, okay, and airpeace have been able to hit that mark. Is it a fluke?
Is it a fluke, or is it just the fact that there's plenty of money being poured into that, or that it's more valuable as an operating entity, than it is as a bankrupt entity? I can't answer that. Again, as a family-run business, he doesn't publish his accounts. All we know about his financials is that every time he talks about them, he says he's losing money. It's when you're losing money in a business for 10 years and you keep doing the same thing, it begs the question as to why you keep running that business. And, again, in the absence of concrete statements from him, you get concrete statements like the ones which are raised in the U.S. indictment in terms of why Airpeace is running, where the monies are being funneled into Airpeace from, and vice versa. And if you read that indictment, it's illuminating. I'm not saying it's true. None of that has been proven in court. But in the absence of a defense provided in court, or in the absence of of any concrete statements to the contrary, other than just saying I'm innocent of this, you have to ask the questions that, is this really what's happening? And if that's the case, then Airpeace is not running necessarily as a business for Nigeria. It is running to generate cash flow in Nigeria that can be used to fund other interests of the primary shareholders. Nothing illegal about that, again, but what is illegal is doing it without necessarily paying the taxes and the appropriate declarations and everything else. RX did the same thing for a very long time. There was nothing illegal about it. It just didn't really help the long-term interests of that particular aspect of the business.
Great. So I'm going to, as we round up, I'm going to end with this. A lot of people have said some of the groups I'm in, everybody's just pointing at Airpeace. Can they run airlines themselves? Have they run airlines themselves? So you in particular have run airlines successfully. And of course, even in this environment, that in the Nigerian environment that is so difficult. So my question is in two folds. What was your staying power running in this very not so favorable environment and succeeding? And what advice will you give Airpeace, for free going forward as they try to stay sustainable in the London Gatwick and their future operations?
I'll tell you, I won't say that I've been, I've run airlines in that respect. I think the reality is I've been part of teams that have run airlines in that. And I think that is the message out there, is that it is most critical for an airline to institutionalize success rather than individualize it. And Airpeace is the perfect example of the opposite of it. Everyone, even now we use Airpeace and Alan Onyema interchangeably. Airpeace does this or Alan does this is effectively the same thing. It is individualized. Tomorrow, God help us, if Alan gets hit by a bus and, something happens to him and he's not able to be the face of Airpeace, what's going to happen? Can that airline continue running? Is there going to be sufficient management capacity, sufficient management authority, a succession plan in place that can step in seamlessly and do that? I have my doubts. In fact, more than doubts. And I think, again, as I said, this is where a lot of people struggle to take on Airpeace as a successful partner, because there are these doubts in that. I think the biggest success that airlines I've been involved with have had is the fact that when I left, they didn't miss a beat. If I'm there today and I'm not there tomorrow, it's not me, but it's the systems I put in place while I was at that airline that really are the legacy. I think I'm more proud of what airlines did after I left them than I am with what they did while I was there. I think that's really, what the hallmark of success is. And I don't think Airpeace is at that stage. I think Airpeace today still remains a cult of personality. And Airpeace is, it's sad because we see as a result, it's not their success which gets talked about, but their exit strategy seems to be the day they come in to a new market is not the day that you should talk about why you might fail in that market. And I think that is also something which needs to change from Airpeace's position. Their exit strategy seems to be victimization. The day you are starting a new route to Gatwick, you should not be talking about I'm being victimized here and I'm, these are the challenges I'm facing. You should be talking positive. And that's not what Airpeace has done. He's come out and said, oh, we're not getting support from Gatwick. That's nonsense. I will honestly tell you this. Knowing the people at Gatwick and having talked to some people over there, they have bent over backwards for Airpeace. They've really made it a focus of their strategy. They've made it a core route in terms of what Gatwick's priorities are, and they have given Airpeace dedicated far more resource to Airpeace than they have to most other new entrant airlines. Now, that's not to say it's not everything that Airpeace wanted. I've operated at Gatwick. I've set up at Gatwick. I've been station manager at Gatwick, been on the Gatwick Airline Operators Committee, so I know Gatwick extremely well. Gatwick's not just forget Gatwick. Every airport in the UK will only go so far. This is not like in African markets where there's 100 people who will run around you and help you do everything. They will be like, here's your manual, read it and call us if you have questions. And if that's called being unhelpful, that's the way it is. And, maybe that's a cultural shift that, that they need to get used to as they become more of a global airline. Because when they start going into the US markets and they start going to other markets, remember, when you blame every market from Johannesburg to Dubai, Sharjah, India, Tel Aviv, London, US, wherever, and every single one of these markets is victimizing you, the problem is you, not everybody else. And, that's something that you need to look in a mirror, and you need to realize that the whole world is not out to get you. People have been successful in these markets, just like foreign airlines have been successful in Nigeria. So look and learn as to how people are being successful, rather than to take your business model and to take your way of running your company and expect that the whole world would run around you. And, I'm just going to go into a couple more details on this, because some of these really irk me. And I've had this argument with Alan to his face. In fact, we almost came to blows once in Mauritius at an Embraer conference. I had to be held back because he was going on about it. But, he says, we were denied slots at Heathrow Airport. The reality is Air Peace has never once applied for slots at Heathrow Airport. So they have never been denied. Certainly, he probably won't get them if they applied, but when he comes out and says, we have been denied access to Heathrow Airport, that is simply untrue. It is a blatant lie. They have never once applied, because there is, this is all public record. There is a seasonal report that is filed which says the following people applied for slots at Heathrow. These many slots were granted, these many slots were denied. And every other airline in the world that applied for slots and was denied is listed over there. Air Peace has never once been listed over there. And Gatwick Airport, he never once applied in time for by the slot application deadline, even for the slots he's operating right now. He got them out of the goodness of ACL's heart, in terms that you missed the deadline, but still, because it's a strategically important route, we will allocate from the reserve quota for you. So again, when you don't play by the rules and then expect people to keep calling a foul on you, that's just the way things are going to happen. You need to start playing by rules in other people's countries and in other people's systems. Dubai, he was not kicked out of Dubai Airport. He forgot. They flat out forgot to file for the slots renewal during COVID, because they weren't operating. Someone in their schedules department forgot to just send, yes, we want to retain rights to these slots. So they didn't retain rights to the slots. Somebody else took them. Now, it's not a case of you can't come back in. It's just that it's now full. Somebody else is flying what you were flying. It's not like we can just conjure up more space out of thin air. And this is what the problem is. You cannot blame the rest of the world for your own team's incompetence. Sometimes look within, sometimes learn from it, because 1, 2, maybe I can believe is up against you. But the entire world, and literally it is becoming the entire world that has been blamed, that is victimizing Air Peace, when the reality is it's probably him that is the problem, not everybody else.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's on this note that we'll come to the end of this podcast.
When my Nigeria visa gets rejected next, I'm coming to you because of this podcast.
Yes, you're going to come to me, and we're going to make sure, because again, what we try to do is on this podcast is really not bring down anyone. Basically, this has been very enlightening. If the team at Air Peace can rather than look at but to look at some of the key things that was said. We are all rooting for it. If Air Peace continue to fly Lagos, London, we are all the ultimate beneficiary, and it does passengers a whole lot of good than Air Peace failing on that route. So who benefits from them not making that route? So at the end of the day, we are looking at how Air Peace can just like you said, look at itself in the mirror and kind of tweak some of the things that it needs to tweak, and then be sustainable. At the end of the day, what we are doing at this podcast is to make sure that we look at aviation sustainability, and African aviation sustainability is at the heart of what we're trying to do, because a whole lot is going wrong. On that note, thank you very much, Sean, for being on my podcast, and looking forward to having you again.
me.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye.